There are so many weapons to choose from in Escape from Tarkov, it's almost intimidating. It's hard to tell which ones you should keep, sell, sink all your money into, or even devote the rest of your life to. In this video, I'll briefly go over every single assault rifle to help you choose which one you're going to take into your next raid. Out of the box, stock AK-12 is actually one of the best because the 700 RPM actually makes it the fastest TTK out of all of these AKs, and the base stats aren't that bad. Unfortunately, it doesn't accept many legacy AK mods, and the attachments available aren't very good. It's a lot like the RPK, but you have even less modding options. The AK-105 suffers a little bit from short barrel syndrome, meaning the recoil will suffer a little bit more compared to longer AKs. It can still be worth investing in some circumstances. Save your money and attachments on different guns and just build it to be as cool as possible. Roleplay as Russian Special Forces and go commit some war crimes. Okay, now we're getting into some kosher Soviet era firearms. Each one of these AKs have very subtle differences that most players won't even really notice, but we're here for the really nitty gritty details. Alright, let's start with the AK-S74. The S signifies that it takes a skeleton folding stock, which can be upgraded to the PT stocks. Out of the box, the gun has a little bit worse recoil than most, but better ergonomics. AK-S74N. The only difference between the AK-S74 and the AK-S74N is the N variants of AK have a dovetail mount, and you can mount proprietary Soviet optics on these AKs. I quite like the OPK-7, so I use these variants quite frequently. The AK-74M has more ergonomics than the previous, making it one of the better stock AKs. The M means it has a dovetail mount and only accepts modern AK stocks like the PT. The AK-74 may have 5 less points of ergonomics than the 74M, but what makes the legacy AK-74N better than the rest is it can accept the Zhukov stock, which is the most effective AK stock for mitigating recoil. Now remember, all N variants of AK signifies that it comes with a dovetail mount for Soviet style optics, but the AK-74N also has 1 less point of recoil for some reason. Let's talk about the AK-S74U for a sec. Why is it this good? Why can't the AK-105 be this good? The AK-S74U series rifle have the lowest vertical recoil, highest ergonomic, but only suffers from a higher MOA and horizontal recoil. This gun is widely considered the meta for 545. By now we should know that the N in the AK-S74UN signifies the dovetail mount, making this the best AK-74U in my opinion, because until you unlock the XRSU74SU, the only other optic mounting options are the B18, which looks gross and has a lot of height over bore, and the Goliath, which puts the optic a little bit too far up. The dovetail mount can accept the OPK-7 if you take the dust cover off. The UB variant can only be found and bought with the suppressor, but the suppressor is worth a lot less than the extra price, so I only really recommend you use this if you find it. Controversial opinion here, I think the 74 and the 74U are just as good. The 74 has a little bit lower horizontal recoil, so I find it a little bit easier to control, but it's really up to personal preference. Okay, let's take a break from AKs and go west to start looking at some of the 5.56 chambered weapons. Let's start with the AUG-A1. I fucking hate this gun. This is like the AK-12 of 5.56, but 100 times worse. The only mod you can do to this gun is a suppressor. You can't even remove the awful included scope with the AUG-A1. The eye relief is so bad you can't even lean with this gun, and the backup irons barely fix this issue. It's a miracle I was able to get B-roll footage with this gun. Let's talk about the Sagar L for a sec. Guns with a lower base recoil come out of the box better, but don't really take attachments very well. And by that I mean the attachments mitigate only a percentage of recoil, so guns like the Sagar L, out of the box they're okay, but you can't really mod them to get much better even though they accept the mods. This makes the Sagar L outclassed by most of the other guns because you can't really get it to be very, very good. On top of that, it has very poor ergonomics compared to the rest. It's still really cheap on the flea market, so it's not a bad budget blaster. There are 3 variants of the G36. The first is the G36C, unlocked at Peacekeeper level 2. The G36C is a lot like the Scar, but just a little bit better. It has slightly better base stats, so it carried me out through the mid-wipe. Those who saw me streaming will have seen me run it a lot. It's just a really cheap and effective rifle to run during the mid-game. The G36K is a longer version unlocked at Peacekeeper level 3. It has slightly lower recoil, but even at its most meta build, it's outclassed by other assault rifles due to the ergo. Still not a bad rifle. The stock G36 is trash and belongs in a dumpster. Although I managed to get 2 shooter-born and heaven kills with the built-in scope, I swear the footage is somewhere on my hard drive. It fucking sucks and should be replaced by the Picatinny rail. The gun is very long and cumbersome, especially with the suppressor, and can't take any foregrip attachments or flashlights. The G36C is probably my favorite variant. The H&K 416A5. Although it has the highest rate of fire of all the 5.56 options, the 416 has a difficult to control recoil pattern. It takes attachments very well, so it can be mitigated. This gun is best used absolutely juiced up to the max, or if you're just trying to do like a DevGru RP. I mean, just look at how nice it looks. When I play Airsoft, this was my blaster. The MDR has to be the most average gun in Escape from Tarkov. It shoots full auto, but not really fast. It has decent base recoil, but doesn't take attachments very well. There's not much you can do to juice it up, but it doesn't really need to be. It's a jack of all trades, but master of none. I really like it because you can just put a suppressor and scope on it and just get into a raid for really cheap. Good ergonomics too. It's pretty much the opposite of a 416, but can be just as effective if used correctly. Okay, the AUG A3. I take back everything I said about the G36C. The AUG A3 is the shit for mid-wipe carrying. Although it's not available until Peacekeeper level 3, you can find it on the flea market for just a little bit more. Out of the box, this gun performs great after a little bit of modding. The proprietary T4 AUG suppressor is almost as effective as any of the meta suppressors, and you can mount whatever optic you want. It has a flashlight mount. Although it doesn't take 60 round mags, the 42 round AUG mags work perfectly fine. The AK-101 is the second generation Russian immigrant you had a crush on in high school. It's an AK, but it shoots 5.56. Weird. This gun takes attachments very well and is worth sinking money into to build the meta version, because the low rate of fire and low recoil makes this gun an absolute laser beam. Although the low rate of fire makes the TTK a bit higher, this is my favorite 5.56 gun to use because it's so easy. The one downside is the lack of 60 round mags. Unfortunately, you're stuck with only 30. The AK-102 is just the shorter version of the 101. By now we should know that typically longer barrel equals less recoil, but during my research for this video I discovered that the AK-102 is actually only a tiny bit spicier than the 101 in their meta configurations, but makes up for it with its ergonomics and being more maneuverable. Honestly, friendship ended with AK-101, now 102 is my best friend. In its higher end configurations, the M4 shoots straight and fast. It's one of the most deadly assault rifles in the game, however it requires a lot of know-how and money to make it usable. While it's possible to make effective budget builds earlier in the game, I usually reserve this gun until the end of the wipe until I have the money and trader level to absolutely juice it up. The M4 is good because the M4 is good.
Hey guys, post-edit Dilsdo here. I just want to take this moment to ask you to like this video and subscribe to the channel. You can also follow me on Twitch. I do stream Escape from Tarkov, and I have this little gimmick where I make beats in between the loading screens. This video took a long time to make because I had to get footage for every single assault rifle in the game, and I did recycle a little bit of footage from last wipe, but it was all pretty much made this week. I sank pretty much every ruple I had into building kits to gain the footage. My goal was never to survive these raids, so I lost a lot of kits and ruples making this. And it was during the quest where everybody needed 50 PMC kills, so Factory was full of just absolute beefy boys. If this video gets enough traction, I'll make another one on SMGs, but I'll have to do it next wipe when I unlock everything. Also, let me know if you want me to go over the ammo types, because I actually did that while making the video, but I felt like it was just going a little too long, so maybe we'll do it next time. Anyway, enjoy the rest of the video.
Okay, we have to do AKs again, this time in 7.62x39. At the bottom of this list, we have the AKMS. Do you remember what the S stands for? It's the folding stock. The folding stock has very poor recoil control and it cannot be replaced, making this gun kick like a mule no matter what you do with it. It's good for Punisher Part 2 if you want to save a few ruples or if you're just really into doing jihad roleplay. The AKMSN is the same but has a dovetail mount and 2 extra points of recoil for some reason. The problem with the AK-103 is it can't take modern suppressors or the Zukov stocks, making them outclassed by other 7.62x39 variants. And this is a very spicy cartridge that you want to tame as much as possible. These guns are definitely usable, but it was a struggle going against late game players with their meta guns. The AK-104 is the shorter barrel version of the 103 and has its typical trades of a tiny bit of recoil for more ergo and a more maneuverable barrel. The AKM can mount the Zukov stock and the PR suppressor, giving it a staggering 12 points of recoil less compared to the 103, which makes a huge difference. Since there are better options in 7.62 by 39 to sink your money into meta attachments, I would most recommend this as a mid-early game baller on a budget type gun. The gun does sound the coolest suppressed. What does the N in the AKMN stand for? I'll give you 10 seconds to think about it. That's right, dovetail mount. The AKMN also has one less recoil and one more ergonomics and comes with a really neat looking backlight mag. Cool. Alright, let's talk about the Mark 47 Mutant. A lot of people claim this is the best gun in the game, and I can see why. The 650 RPM is slow, but faster than all the other 7.60 by 39 guns. The lower ROF makes the recoil impulse very smooth, especially with the low vertical recoil. It is a really expensive gun that takes attachments very well, so this gun is best used with the most premium attachments available. I think it's worth mentioning that the long barrel is not really worth it in my opinion. It can shave a few points of recoil off and allow better handguards to attach, but it makes the gun really clunky and more expensive. But most importantly, it looks ugly. Short barrel kings unite. Finally, the RD704. Most prefer the Mutant over the RD because that tiny increase in RPM drops people a little bit quicker, but the RD is an ergo machine. That's why it takes a spot for my favorite gun in the game. It's also cheaper than the Mutant and requires less modding. It's so good that I'm just gonna let the background footage speak for itself. Here we go. You are dead in 3, 2, 1. Alright, let's talk about the weird guns, starting with the Ash 12. The only ammo worth using is PS12B because the recoil is so horrendous that you need to put your target down as fast as possible, and PS12 isn't going to do it with only 28 pen. PS12B has 46 pen and 102 damage. Unfortunately, you can only obtain this ammo by crafting it at 80 rounds a time. This gun is a bully. The PS12B is the meanest round in the game. Not because of how good it is, because it just punches down. I mean, look at this. Oof. This gun is made for killing low to mid-level players because it will one-tap the thorax through class 4 armor. Now, it's very possible to one-tap through class 5 armor, but it didn't with this guy, so... Before we talk about the Val, we have to talk about the ammo. The two main rounds worth using in 9x39 are SP6 and SPP. SP6 took a massive hit this wipe by being removed from the workbench, which unfortunately made me fall out of love with this gun. I'm a firm believer in spending extra money on ammo, but for over 2k a round for SP6 is kind of pushing it. And that's after you complete the difficult task test drive. Anyway, it has 46 pen. SPP is a lot more affordable, but obviously less effective at 48 pen and a whopping 68 flesh damage. Due to these nerfs, I've fallen out of love with the Val. I used it a lot last wipe, but really only picked it up to get footage for this video. It's also worth noting that it costs 40k for a 30 round mag. The Val has pretty decent recoil control, but the subsonic ammunition doesn't carry its velocity out to range, so it's best used as a CQB gun. This is the Patron of assault rifles. It's good, but you can do better for cheaper. It's the MCX's turn. The MCX uses 300 blackout and finally got a good buff and reasonable ammo to use. Before we were subjected to 300 blackout M62 and blackout AP. M62 is just a very underwhelming round at 36 pen, and blackout AP is very effective at 48 pen but is very hard to obtain. Now we have CBJ, which has 43 pen and 58 flesh damage at only 900 rubles. The MCX is essentially the M4 that your mom says you have at home. It performs like a mid-level M4. The recoil is decent if you invest some money into it, but due to it being subsonic, it feels more like an SMG, especially with its rate of fire. What I like about the MCX is you can buy 180 rounds of CBJ per reset, so it never really feels like ammo is scarce, but knowing BSG will probably get that number reduced soon. Finally, we have the big beefy boy known as 7.62 by 51 NATO or 308. The SA58 is a really silly gun. You're going to need to put a lot of love in this to make it even usable. With a little bit of TLC and money, you can get it down to a usable recoil at the cost of having the longest boy in Tarkov taking all of your ergo away. Sometimes I like to make a shorty version and just barrel stuff people on factory. Just like its smaller Tanner brother in 5.56, the MDR 308 does everything pretty okay. It can plink people from further away like all the other 7.62 guns, and it will fire in full auto, but the recoil makes it unreliable. On paper it seems like a good middle ground, but I never really understood the hype around this gun. Okay, here's how you run the Scar. Step 1, buy a Scar. Step 2, buy another Scar. Step 3, combine the 2 Scars and make 2 two-tone Scars. Two-tone PMC, two-tone Life. The Scar H is my favorite 308 assault rifle because you can almost control the full auto recoil and still retain some ergonomics. The barrel may be long and cumbersome in its meta configuration, but the stats don't lie. It's become a little expensive due to the fact that it cannot be purchased on the flea market, but there's no free lunch in Tarkov.